AITA for refusing to help care for my mom's fiancé's disabled daughter, even though my mom begged me to take classes so I could give them a break. I, 20M, grew up in a complicated family, but for most of my life it was just me and my mom, 42F. She raised me on her own, and while things weren't always perfect, I had a stable home. 2 years ago, when I left for college, I still thought of her house as my home base. I had my own room there, my stuff, and a sense of belonging. That all changed about 10 months ago when she got engaged to her fiancé, 45M, and he moved in with his 2 children, his 6-year-old son and his 4-year-old daughter. The 4-year-old has multiple medical conditions. I know she has a seizure disorder and something called osteogenesis imperfecta, which I've since learned is a brittle bone disease. There's also another condition involving her stomach or esophagus that causes paralysis or spasms, but I don't know the exact medical terminology. What I do know is that her health needs are extremely complex. She requires constant supervision and specialized care. Before her fiancé and his kids even moved in, my mom spent over 2 months taking classes to learn how to care for the little girl. She wanted to be fully prepared, since the children's biological mother is completely out of the picture and the responsibility falls entirely on their father, and now on my mom. I respected that. She stepped up in a way that was admirable, committing herself to helping this child who needed more than the average parent could provide. But from my perspective, it was clear this wasn't just going to change her life. It was going to change mine too. My mom's fiancé moving in with his children meant my room was no longer mine. It went to the 4-year-old, which made sense logistically, but it also meant I lost my last physical tie to that house. Suddenly, when I visited home, I wasn't coming back to my room. I was just another guest, expected to fit into a house that was now structured around the needs of a medically complex child. I try not to resent it. My mom deserves happiness, and I know she loves her fiancé, but I couldn't help noticing how much of her time and energy shifted toward caring for his daughter. I knew it wasn't easy for her either. She told me about the training sessions, the sleepless nights, the stress of making sure she was doing everything right. Still, she kept pushing forward, determined to make it work. What I didn't realize at the time was that this shift wasn't just going to affect how my mom lived. It was going to create new expectations for me as well. The idea that I might be asked to step in to learn how to provide the same kind of specialized care hadn't crossed my mind until it was raised directly. Suddenly, visiting my mom's house wasn't just about spending time with her. It was about being a potential backup caregiver, about being asked to take on responsibilities I had never signed up for, especially for a child who wasn't mine and who needed a level of care far beyond what an untrained college kid should be expected to handle. That's where the real conflict began. When I first left for college 2 years ago, my mom promised me that my room would always be there for me. She wanted me to know I still had a home to come back to, no matter what. And for a while, that promise held true. Whenever I visited, I could unpack, crash on my bed, and feel like I belonged. But everything changed when her fiancé moved in with his kids. Suddenly, my room wasn't my room anymore. It was theirs. Specifically, it went to the 4-year-old girl with the medical needs. And on a practical level, I understood why. She needed a safe, stable environment, her own space for equipment, medication, and privacy. Giving her my old room made sense. But emotionally, it felt like being erased. The first time I came home after they moved in was Christmas. My mom had gently broken the news beforehand. "Sweetie, I gave your room to the little one. She really needs it. I hope you understand." I told her it was fine, but deep down I felt displaced. So instead of staying at her house, I stayed with my grandparents. They were more than happy to have me, and honestly, it was easier. I had privacy there, a bed that was mine, and the ability to come and go without disrupting my mom's new household routine. My mom was disappointed, though. She wanted me to stay with her, to be part of her new family. She even offered to buy a pull-out bed so I could crash in the living room. But the thought of sleeping in a common space with no privacy, while she and her fiancé juggled the chaos of 2 young kids, one with significant medical needs, sounded miserable. I told her staying with my grandparents made more sense for everyone. It spared me the discomfort, and it spared them the stress of trying to fit me into an already hectic schedule. She accepted it, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. To her, it probably felt like I was rejecting her new life. To me, it was just being practical. I didn't want to intrude. I didn't want to feel like a burden. And most of all, I didn't want to get caught up in responsibilities I never asked for. Over the summer, I came home for a few weeks and stayed with my grandparents again. My mom tried harder that time to persuade me to sleep at her house. She brought up the pull-out bed again, and even suggested maybe rearranging things to make space for me. But the reality was, it wasn't about furniture. It was about atmosphere. Her house didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like their home. Her fiancé and his kids had become the center of gravity, and I was just orbiting on the outside. Whenever I visited, I couldn't help but notice how different things felt. The rhythm of the house revolved around the 4-year-old's care, medications, equipment, routines that couldn't be disrupted. My mom was constantly on alert, ready to respond if something went wrong. Her fiancé, too, was stretched thin, managing both kids and supporting her. There was no place for me in that routine, no role I could naturally slip into without being asked to take on more than I was comfortable with. So I kept my distance. I stayed with my grandparents, visited my mom in short bursts, and avoided sleeping over at her place. It wasn't out of spite, it was self-preservation. But to her fiancé, it started to look like avoidance. Like I was deliberately staying away to dodge responsibility or connection. And in a way, maybe I was. Because the truth was, I didn't want to get pulled deeper into a situation I hadn't chosen. During my longer visit home over the summer, the pressure really started to build. Whenever I went over to my mom's house, it wasn't just about catching up or spending time together anymore. There was always this underlying expectation that I'd step into a role I never agreed to. The first time it came up, we were sitting in the kitchen after dinner. My mom casually asked, "Have you thought about maybe taking the same classes I did? Just to know the basics." I was confused at first. "What classes?" I asked. She explained that before her fiancé moved in, she'd taken over 2 months of training courses to learn how to care for his 4-year-old daughter, how to manage her seizure disorder, how to handle her brittle bone condition, how to respond if she stopped breathing or went into a medical crisis. I blinked at her. Why would I need to take those classes? She gave me that soft, coaxing look I know too well. Because it would be helpful. You'd know what to do if something happened. You'd be able to give us a break sometimes, or step in during an emergency. I sat back in my chair, stunned. I wasn't trying to be cruel, but the idea of me being trained to handle life or death medical care for a child who wasn't mine felt absurd. I told her as gently as I could, "Mom, I'm not taking on that responsibility. If you need backup, you should find a professional caregiver, not me." That answer didn't sit well with her fiancé. He leaned forward, his voice sharper than hers. "So, what? You're just never going to learn how to help? You're always going to keep your distance?" I tried to explain. It wasn't about not caring, it was about boundaries. I told them that when I visited, I wanted to spend time with my mom, not trained to be a substitute nurse. I pointed out that I already stayed with my grandparents to avoid disrupting their routine, and that seemed like the healthiest balance for everyone. But my fiancé wouldn't let it go. "You realize this makes it sound like you don't want any involvement in my kids' lives," he said. And I told him the truth. I'll see them when I visit mom. But I'm not signing up for babysitting or caregiver responsibilities. That's not my role. My mom pulled me aside later for a walk, away from the tension. She said she understood where I was coming from, but she hoped I'd reconsider. It's a lot, I know, and you don't live close, so it's not like it would be all the time. But just a few hours when you're visiting, it would mean so much. We get a chance to rest. Hearing her say that twisted me up inside. I love my mom. I don't want to make her life harder, but I also can't ignore how overwhelming that responsibility would be for me. I told her, "I'll visit and spend time with you. But babysitting your fiancé's kids, especially one with such complex needs, is not in my plans." She looked hurt, but nodded. I could see the disappointment in her face, even though she was trying not to push me further. Still, the damage was done. Her fiancé took my refusal personally, and from that moment on, I could feel the tension in every interaction. After that summer visit, the air between me and my mom's fiancé felt heavier every time we crossed paths. Before, I kept things polite and surface level with him. I never pretended he was my dad, but I respected that he made my mom happy. After the conversation about caregiving, though, it was like a switch flipped. He saw me not as her son visiting from college, but as some obstacle, someone refusing to step up in the way he thought I should. One afternoon while I was at their house, he asked point blank if I was ever going to stay overnight there again. I told him no. I explained, again, that there was no privacy for me, and that I already had a place at my grandparents where I felt comfortable. I also said, as gently as I could, that when I visited, it made more sense to plan specific times to see mom, times when she wasn't completely absorbed in the kids' routine, so we could actually talk. He didn't take it well. "So you're saying you don't want to be part of this household at all?" he shot back. I reminded him that I already lived somewhere else most of the year. "This isn't my household," I said. "I'm just visiting my mom. I don't need to be in the middle of everything." His jaw tightened, and he muttered something under his breath about me being selfish. That stung. I wasn't trying to be selfish. I was trying to set boundaries. There's a difference. Later, my mom and I went for another walk. She admitted he was upset, that he thought I was deliberately avoiding a relationship with his kids. I told her I wasn't against seeing them, but I wasn't going to play the role of caregiver or babysitter. I emphasized that my relationship was with her. That's who I came home to see. She sighed and said she understood, but I could tell she was caught in the middle. She wanted me to feel comfortable, but she also wanted her fiancé to feel supported. She asked me to be patient, to at least try to be civil with him, even if I wasn't willing to take on what he was asking. I agreed, but it didn't stop the tension from simmering. Every time I visited, I could feel his eyes on me, like he was evaluating whether I was making enough effort to integrate into their family. If I sat with my mom and had a quiet conversation, he'd find a way to interrupt with something involving the kids. If I politely excused myself to leave, he'd make a comment like, "Off to your grandparents again," in a tone that made it clear he thought less of me for it. It reached a point where I dreaded being around him. I started limiting how often I came to the house, sticking mostly to short visits. My mom noticed, and while she didn't blame me outright, I could tell she was worried. The final straw of that visit was when he confronted me again, saying, "You're 20 now. You're old enough to realize family means stepping up. If you're not willing to do that, maybe you should admit you don't want to be part of this family at all." I bit my tongue because I didn't want to blow up in front of my mom, but inside I was boiling. I didn't choose this family. I didn't agree to help raise his kids. I came home to see my mom. That should have been enough. Instead, I left feeling more like an outsider than ever before. The tension between me and my mom's fiancé didn't stay contained to just the house. He started letting his frustrations spill into conversations with other family members, including my grandparents, the very people who had been giving me a place to stay whenever I came home. The first time I heard about it was after Sunday dinner at my grandparents'. We were sitting around the table, plates cleared, when my grandpa leaned over and said, "So, your mom's fiancé mentioned he's a little disappointed you don't stay at the house anymore." I froze. I hadn't realized he was airing this to them. My grandma jumped in quickly, trying to soften the blow. "He just seems to think if you stayed there, you'd get closer to his kids. You know, become more like family." I wanted to laugh at the irony. My grandparents had been nothing but supportive, never making me feel like a burden. And yet here was my mom's fiancé, framing their generosity as an obstacle, as if them giving me a place to stay was the problem, instead of his own unrealistic expectations. It hurt more than I expected. It felt like he wasn't just criticizing me. He was undermining the safe space my grandparents had built for me. They knew exactly why I stayed with them: privacy, comfort, and the ability to actually enjoy my visits home without being shoved into caregiver duties. But now, thanks to his comments, I could see doubt flicker in their eyes. Were they wondering if they were enabling me? When I went back to my mom's house later that week, I confronted her about it. "Why is he dragging my grandparents into this?" I asked. She sighed, clearly tired of being stuck in the middle. "He just feels like you're keeping your distance on purpose. He thinks if you stayed here, you'd eventually want to help more." I told her point blank, "I'm not avoiding you. I'm avoiding being pressured into responsibilities I never agreed to. That's the difference." She nodded, but looked conflicted. I could tell she understood my side, but she also wanted to keep the peace with him. And in trying to do both, she ended up saying very little, which only made me feel more isolated. The worst part was hearing from my grandparents again later. My grandma, who usually defended me no matter what, quietly asked, "Are you sure you're not being too rigid? Your mom seems overwhelmed, and maybe even a few hours of help from you could mean a lot." That stung because it was exactly what my mom had said on our walks. I knew she was overwhelmed. I wasn't blind to it, but I also knew that crossing that line, agreeing to be trained, agreeing to step in, wouldn't just be a few hours. It would snowball, and suddenly, my identity as her son visiting home would be replaced with a role I didn't want: part-time caregiver. I felt like I was being pushed into a corner. On one side was my mom, who I loved and wanted to support. On another was her fiancé, who clearly saw me as selfish and detached. And now, even my grandparents were subtly questioning whether I was doing enough. The truth is, I didn't want to resent my mom. But every time a subject came up, I felt that resentment creep closer. I hadn't created this situation. I hadn't chosen her fiancé or his kids. And I wasn't the one who decided to make their household revolve around constant medical care. That was their choice. And yet, somehow, I was being treated like I had an obligation to carry a share of it. It left me wondering, was I really standing firm on healthy boundaries, or was I starting to look like the villain in my own family story? Now, whenever I think about going home, I feel this knot in my stomach. What used to be simple, packing a bag, crashing in my old room, spending time with my mom, has turned into a minefield of expectations and tension. I don't resent my mom for wanting to build a new life with her fiancé. I don't even resent the kids. None of this is their fault. But I can't shake the feeling that everyone around me expects me to quietly accept a role I never asked for. I'm not a caregiver. I didn't sign up for medical training or responsibilities that could literally be life or death. I'm her son, not her backup nurse. And yet, when I say that out loud, it feels like I'm disappointing everyone: my mom, her fiancé, even my grandparents. I want to have a relationship with my mom. I want to be part of her life. But I don't want my visits home to revolve around babysitting or stepping into a role that overwhelms me just thinking about it. I'd rather spend time with her in smaller, intentional ways than be swallowed up by a household dynamic that doesn't fit me. Still, I can't ignore the guilt. My mom is exhausted. Her fiancé is frustrated. And even though I know their struggles are my responsibility to fix, I hate feeling like I'm abandoning her when she needs help. AITA for refusing to take on caregiving roles for my mom's fiancé's disabled daughter and choosing to keep my distance instead.